Slack went viral without spending on ads, and Dropbox grew by 3,900% without a marketing team. And many founders know these stories, but what they don't know is what was actually happening behind the scenes. And this episode is about the marketing myth that is costing founders and investors millions and what the smartest people actually do instead. Welcome to Tech for Non-Techies. This is a podcast for business leaders and non-technical founders building the future in the age of AI. Whether you've been in business for 100+ years and you're looking to modernize, or whether you're building something new, this is the show for you. You'll learn how to come up with new ideas and make them come to life, no matter the size of your organization. I've taught tech and innovation at Oxford University, advised companies like Microsoft, and written for the Harvard Business Review. You're going to hear the frameworks and the thinking that I've built and tested and taught at the highest level. And now, it's your turn. Let's get started. Hello, smart people. How are you today? Before we get started with today's lesson, I want to make sure that you know that the deadline to book your free one-on-one sample consulting session with me is next Monday, the 31st of August, 2026. So if you are listening to this in the future, then this is not going to apply. Unless you're very lucky, maybe I'll be doing this again, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the booking link to book your sample session will stop working on the 1st of September, and that is literally next week. So this means that you can have your session in September. So for example, if you're listening to this and you're on vacation and you can't book your session in August, that's totally fine. The calendar link is going to give you September availability. But the link will literally only be live until next week, until Monday night, basically. So yesterday, I literally had a sample session with a non-technical founder, and I want to tell you about that sample session so you can basically see what the person got out of it and what we talked about. So this founder wanted to get my take on how to get her product ready for her first enterprise customer. So she had already tested it. She already had somebody who was interested in becoming the first customer. And now it's like, okay, now we need to build this thing in order for an enterprise customer to be ready, with all of their compliance and so on to buy it. And so we also talked about how to build her go-to-market strategy and how to get other customers when she onboards this first one. So we talked about how to lead developers as a non-technical founder, how to set her pricing so customers buy, but so she actually also makes money, how to use the funds that she has raised, so how to use those funds wisely, so basically she can raise more in future, and how to be seen as a leader in her field so clients and investors actually write those checks, because if they don't see you as an authority, they are not going to fund you or they're not going to buy your stuff. And we literally got all of this done in 1 hour on Zoom. So we covered product, marketing and sales, and personal brand. So if you're listening and you're thinking, yes, I want this too, which you frankly should be, then book your session because it is free until the 31st of August. And you don't actually have to be a founder with a product. You can be a corporate innovator, or you can simply be an ambitious professional who wants to thrive in an age changed by technology. So the link to book your session is in the show notes, and it will expire on the 1st of September. Okay, now that class announcements are done, I'm going to piss off my European listeners. And European listeners, I am European, so I love you, but this is tough love right now. So in general, US startups invest way more in marketing than Europeans. And this leads to them growing faster, grabbing more market share, and becoming the dominant players. European founders, on the other hand, undervalue marketing and do not fight for marketing budgets when they're fundraising. So this means that you basically, if you're a European founder, you are likely to invest less in getting your product in front of customers, and therefore you have fewer customers and basically you make less money, which sucks. And this means that you're either likely to go out of business or get acquired for a fairly small valuation in comparison to your US counterpart. So I actually looked up the data and I've got the evidence to back it up, sadly. So the average exit for a UK startup is around £12 million, which is about $18 million. The average acquisition of a US startup is around $61 million. So that's about 4 times the difference. And marketing investment is a significant part of why there is this massive difference. And yes, there are all sorts of factors that go into this. But the fact that European founders underinvest in marketing is a really well-known trend. You might have heard it from other people. It is actually recognized by US startups, and they basically use that knowledge to their advantage, as they should, because this is capitalism. So now I want to be kind to the European founders here, because I do know that it's not all up to you. I know that European investors don't make it easy for you, because I have raised money from Europeans and Americans, and the Americans have a very different attitude to risk and to investing in marketing. So most European VCs have actually never been founders themselves. And a lot of them, I think most of them, actually come from banking and consultancy backgrounds, which I think makes absolutely no bloody sense. Anyway, so there's this organization called Diversity VC, and they do lots of research into the composition, basically into the VC market in the UK and in Europe. And so according to their research, 68% of US VCs have startup experience. So they've been a founder, or they've been on a founding team, or in an early stage startup. In the UK, that figure is just 8. So that means that basically if you're raising money in the UK and in Europe and in continental Europe, I believe that figure is actually even less. So basically, if you're raising money in Europe, or you're just dealing with European investors, you are most likely dealing with spreadsheet people. So these are people who have never taken a risk in their lives. They have always had prestigious and steady jobs with high salaries. And these spreadsheet people are deciding on which risk takers to fund. I mean, yeah, you see where this is going. So this is why there's so much data to basically back up the fact that whilst it might look like, okay, people are educated in the US and in Europe, the economies of, Europe as a whole and US are similar, there are just stark differences, which we then can attribute to at least partially to behavior. So between 2016 and 2024, the US raised $932 billion in venture capital. Europe raised just $133 billion in venture capital. So despite these two economies being roughly the same size. So when we're looking at European VCs, they are more risk averse, they have less money, they don't want to invest in marketing, because this is a crucial point. Marketing by default is very risky. So even if we just step away from the startup world for a minute and we'll go into the corporate world, the CMO job is the riskiest job in the C-suite, whether that's a big company or, Series A startup. The marketing job, the CMO job, Chief Marketing Officer job, that's the one with the shortest tenure. So basically, if you're a CMO, you are the most likely person in the C-suite to get fired. Stressful, right? And this is because marketing requires running experiments, and you pay for those experiments. Often you pay quite a lot for these experiments. And many of these experiments do not work out. So no wonder these people get fired. And I'm going to give you some examples. So if you have a B2C product, let's say you have a consumer app, you're going to run advertising campaigns on Meta. And that is not cheap, especially if you're targeting audiences in the US and in Europe. That is not cheap. So this basically means that you have to create videos, and you have to create new written copy. You have to create imagery. You have to create stuff that when people see on Instagram, they basically stop the scroll. Some of the stuff is going to bomb and it's not going to convert. Some of it might even offend your audience, and then you'll have to apologize. And we're now living in a time where you're basically probably going to offend somebody, and they're probably going to get vocal. And you're going to offend somebody if you try to take a view or try to stand out. But then the alternative is, okay, you don't try to stand out and you don't try to take a view, which basically means that you're just super bland. And if you're super bland and doing advertising, that's not going to work either. So do you see that basically you're kind of screwed no matter what you do? Like, there is risk everywhere if you are doing marketing campaigns. Basically, marketing is risky, and being a marketer is a risky job. US founders and investors accept that risk as part of the job. They're not saying, okay, you know what, it's risky, so let's not do it. It's like, it's risky, it is part of the job. We know startups, we know innovation is risky, but also this is where, we can make the most money. So let's just deal with the fact that it's risky and accept it. Now, nobody likes losing money on things that they thought would work out. I have lost money on things I thought would work out. It sucks. The difference is whether you believe this is a normal part of the innovation process, and it is, or whether you freak out and stop altogether. And by the way, in this episode, I'm not going to go into why there is this marketing attitude difference. This is not a sociology podcast, but this is definitely something that I have discussed with my US founder and VC friends over many glasses of wine, because it's an interesting and kind of frustrating thing to discuss. Anyway, so let's talk about the viral growth myth. And let's talk about Slack and Dropbox and basically what they did. So a lot of founders are going to tell themselves that their product will grow by itself. And I see this especially from technical founders, because they basically see like marketing and sales as this like bad, dirty discipline. And they think, we're going to make this amazing product and then we won't need marketing. And often they point to Slack and Dropbox as proof because both went viral without official ad spend. Neither paid for advertising. So basically, what did they actually do instead? This is your answer to investors or founders who say, oh, these are the case studies. We don't need to spend on advertising either. So here's what they're missing. Slack's founders had deep connections with journalists because they had already launched Flickr. And so they were basically a known entity. So they used those relationships deliberately to earn media attention, which gave them credibility and reach well beyond their typical software, like what a typical software launch would generate. This is not organic growth. This is literally public relations. So doing public relations, that is a job. So if you're doing a job, you need to get paid. These founders had these relationships. They had this kind of PR capital, but they still took time to actually, reach out to journalists and to make it happen. You could try to emulate this example. If you don't have media relationships, you could hire a PR firm and do it yourself. So theoretically, that's not ad spend, but it's still a media budget. Okay. Relationship building is also a type of media budget. Like there's nothing free here. Now let's look at the Dropbox case study. Dropbox had a referral program, which is really, really famous. It's a really great case study on how to create a referral program. But before it, they were spending close to $300 to acquire a customer, and that customer was paying $99 per. So this basically shows that their paid ads were not working because, if you're paying $300 to acquire somebody that's basically paying about $100, you're losing $200 per person. So paid ads were not working. So they basically had to do something else. They built a referral program instead. And I really recommend that you find out what that looked like so then you can try to emulate it yourself. With their referral program, they grew from 100,000 registered users to 4 million in 15 months. That is 3,900% growth. But that referral program was something that the team worked on very deliberately. It still had a cost. So the cost was actually in the space, like Dropbox space that you can use. So basically you could invite a friend, and if you invited a friend and they took up your invitation to join Dropbox, you get storage space on Dropbox and they get storage space on Dropbox. So it was a clever thing to do. They still had to pay for it because they still had to pay basically for the storage space. And also they still had to tell people about it. So, and they had to do lots and lots of experiments before they got to a point when they were like, okay, this incentivizes people enough to share, but we can also afford it. If this sounds complicated, it is. It took time, it took effort, it took very clever people who were getting paid to invent this over a period of months. It took time to build and money to run. Nothing goes viral by accident. Slack invested in PR and in relationships. Dropbox invested in building a referral engine. Both are forms of marketing investment, just not the kind that basically is very easy to explain, like, oh, this is advertising spent on Meta. So yes, products do grow via referrals. If you create and invest in a referral program, the key word is invest. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, how do I get started? Or, I don't have lots of venture capital money to begin investing. I totally get you. So here's some advice for people who are at the early stage or people who basically have decided not to raise money, which, is also a really good idea. I raised money for my first company. I haven't for my second. Basically, if you're in a situation where you cannot afford to run Meta ad campaigns or, fund your own events, building a personal brand is the most capital efficient form of marketing available to you, and it is available to all of you. Because if you have access to the internet, you have access to LinkedIn, you have access to humans, then you can do this. And by the way, personal brand building is especially important for B2B because in B2B, people buy from other people that they trust. So people are buying from you as the founder. They are, yes, they're interested in the product, but they're really also interested in you. So a great example is that I had been establishing myself as the global thought leader, as the global expert on non-technical founders for years. I had written about what non-technical founders need to know about tech in Forbes for years, and then created this podcast, created this company. And the Bahrain government, who actually wanted to create a program for non-technical founders, found me and reached out to me. And that was basically a multi-six-figure contract, which was not only delightful financially, but it was a really, really fun thing to do. And that literally came from me establishing a personal brand. So this was a strategy, and that strategy is something that I have monetized very, very successfully. This strategy is available to all of you, to every founder, to every innovator, regardless of your budget. And this is actually something that we can discuss in our sample session. So make sure you book it before the link expires. Okay, now let's talk about enterprise sales. If you're building a B2B product and you're selling to large organizations, you don't want to spend money on Meta because your marketing budget is going to be really, really different. But the investment is no less real, and both are difficult and both are frustrating, just in different ways. So enterprise sales cycles, they typically take 6 to 18 months from first conversation to a signed contract. I have friends who have enterprise sales companies where they basically create an enterprise software product where the sales cycle is longer, like 2 years, 2.5 years. Like, this is an actual thing. During that time, you're attending conferences, you're building relationships, you're flying to meetings, you're having dinners, you're preparing for these meetings. You and your team are creating a really thoughtful custom presentation for potential customers who may or may not buy in 2 years' time. Now, this costs money because you need to eat, and it costs time. It costs your time, which has value, even if that is not showing up on the balance sheet. So what I have seen is that European founders consistently underprice their own time and underestimate how long enterprise deals take. This means that they run out of runway before the deals close. Now, every founder actually does this, European founders and US founders. But I find that because there is more of there's more of a risk appetite amongst US founders and investors, that people are essentially more willing to risk like longer customer acquisition runs and bigger advertising budgets. So wherever you are in the world, if you are going to sell to enterprises, just be realistic. Budget for the actual real sales cycle. And don't, like, when you're fundraising or when you're looking at the amount of money that you have and you're thinking, oh, we can spend it all on product. Don't do that. Don't spend it all on product. Make sure that you have enough money either for a long sales cycle if you are in enterprise, or for a proper ad campaign, some of which is going to work, some of which is going to fail if you're a B2C product. And so if you are listening to this and you're thinking, well, how much do we actually spend? Well, there's no single number that works for every company. I can't just say to you like 30% for everybody. And if you ever hear anybody who's like, yes, it's 30% for all companies, just don't listen to them, because that is not a thing. Every company is different, but also every sector is different and every stage is different. So here are some benchmarks for different types of companies in different stages. So consumer-facing companies, B2C companies, they average around 14% of revenues on marketing, and B2B companies average around 9%. Now, this is kind of useful to know, but don't stick to that. These are mature companies with established revenue. So again, I wanted you to know these figures because investors might say to you, well, you only need 14% of your revenue on your marketing. If you're early stage, that's really not going to work for you because when you're early stage, you don't really have any revenue. So 14% of your revenue could literally be 14 cents. So early stage companies, before you have product market fit, if you're in that stage, you're actually going to be typically spending between 30 to 60% of your revenue on testing and awareness. So that's because your revenue is small. So actually, spending anything is just going to be a higher proportion. And also you have a lot to prove. You need to spend disproportionately to find your customers, to test your message, and to build your audience. And this is basically how the game works. So here's what I want you to ask yourself. You can write down these questions, or you can just go to techfornontechies.co and get the transcript and basically put it into AI and get the questions from the AI, or just search for them in the transcript. So, question to ask yourself are, how much does it cost to acquire one customer? If you don't know, make an estimate. Like, you need to have some sort of guesstimate. How much does that customer spend with you over their lifetime? That's called customer lifetime value. Again, if you don't know, take an educated guess. I mean, when you're kind of forecasting for the early stages, all educated guesses, which you just update once you get new information. Now, if acquiring your customers costs less than what they spend, then you have a business. If it costs more, then you have a problem, and essentially you need to revise that. So what I've just given you is called customer acquisition cost versus customer lifetime value. This is something that we don't have time to go into in huge detail today, but at least you kind of have a quick overview of what this is. Essentially, you just need to make sure that it costs you less to acquire a customer than what a customer is going to pay you for the entire time that they work with you. Okay, now that we got some statistics, we got some concepts, we got some questions, what do you actually need to do? So think about those questions, answer them. If you're a European founder, honestly, target American investors. They're much more likely to understand why marketing spend is a necessary ingredient to success. And yes, this is a generalization. You might have some American investors who completely disagree with this, but I'm talking about general trends. If you are going to target American investors and you are in Europe, you might have to move your company to the US and set the company up as a Delaware C corporation. This is doable and it's worth it. Basically, I'm not a lawyer, talk to your lawyer. This is something that lots of European companies do. Now, US founders, take a moment to be grateful for the fact that this is easier for you because you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by investors who are basically much more likely to fund risk. So even if fundraising is feeling really difficult, then it's easier for you than it is for your equally smart European counterpart. Okay, so for all of you, whether you're founders, investors, or corporate innovators, wherever you are, please be honest and realistic about how much you actually need to spend on marketing and sales to be successful. If you're building an enterprise software product, you will need to primarily invest in sales and in relationship building. This means that you're probably going to have a long sales cycle and you need to budget for that. Now, if you're targeting consumers or smaller businesses, you're going to spend money on ads. Figure out what the costs are for targeting those people and making and running ad experiments. Do not ever assume that you'll make something so brilliant that it will just go viral by itself or only grow via referrals. Yes, referral growth is possible, as the Dropbox case study shows, but that Dropbox case study was literally a result of investment and trial and error and experimentation, and they still actually had to pay for the storage space. Now, if you're fundraising from investors or from your CFO, or if you're basically just budgeting how much money of your own money you're going to invest in a project, please have a realistic marketing budget, not one based on build it and they will come, because that is a fallacy. And if the CFO or the investors or your co-founders push back, then fight for that budget, because basically tell them that if they really only fund the product without funding how that product gets to customers, the funding in the product is going to get wasted because nobody will use the product or pay for it. So it is in their interest to fund marketing spend if they're going to fund the product in the first place. Now, if you found this episode useful and insightful and you want to apply it to your own situation, which I'm assuming you do because you're still listening, so I highly recommend that you book your sample session with me so we can actually dive into your unique situation and apply it to whatever you are working on. But remember that the link expires on the 31st of August in the evening, which is this coming Monday. The link to book is in the show notes. And on that note, thank you very much for listening. And I shall be back in your delightful smart ears next week. Ciao.